Sometimes the best stories in golf aren't found on tour. You'll find them at the back of the range. And here's your host, Ben Adelberg.
And thank you again for joining me here at the back of the range. I am your host, Ben Adelberg. This is episode 56. Before we get to this week's episode, I have a couple Mojo updates for you all. What are Mojo updates? Well, there seems to be a phenomenon where good things happen to guests that have been on the Back of the Range Golf podcast. Now, do I think the podcast is the sole reason for the good fortune that these people are experiencing? Of course not. It's their hard work, it's their dedication and passion for the game of golf. But are we going to pass up the chance to highlight the fact that these great things happened after they came on the podcast? Of course not. Come on, we got to take a little bit of credit. So, congrats to Coach Laura Ianello from the University of Arizona. A couple of her ladies that are on the golf team, they have been invited to play in the first Augusta National Women's Amateur Championship. So, congrats to Haley Moore, congrats to Vivian Ho for getting the invite. You'll remember that her team won the national championship last year. Another one of our guests from season 1, Steve LeBrun. He's making his first start of the web.com season down in the Bahamas. He had a rough start in the first round, shot 76, and then he apparently decided to just jump over everyone. He jumped 98 spots after his second round 65 and his third round 66. We wish Steve the best going into the final round. So if you're listening to this episode, the final round is today down in the Bahamas. So log in, check him out on Twitter, give him some support, and we will continue following him throughout the rest of the web.com season. Both of these episodes, as well as all of our previous episodes, are available in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm sure you know by now that we are on Instagram at the Back of the Range Podcast. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. All of this information is available in the show notes of this episode. Don't forget, subscribe, leave reviews in Apple Podcast. I can't stress that enough. Go check out thebackoftherange.com for all of this information. And if you want to shoot me an email with some comments, believe me, they're always welcome. Our guest this week has had his fair share of experiences around the game of golf. In no particular order of importance, here are just a few of them. PGA Tour caddy, All-American at USC, PGA Tour player, Champions Tour player, Golf Channel commentator, Ryder Cup assistant captain, and a short game instructor that's worked with at least 3 former world number ones. That is quite the resume, and I tried to cover it all with our guest this week, Dave Stockton Jr. Jr. and I spoke about some of the most memorable moments of his professional career, as well as his time looping for his dad on the PGA and Champions Tour. We spoke about working with his dad and brother Ron and forming Stockton Golf. They helped the short games with players like Adam Scott, Rory McIlroy, and Phil Mickelson. The family also got together at the 91 Ryder Cup in Kiowa. Dave Stockton was the captain, and his 2 boys were the assistant captains. Can you imagine that ever happening again? I had to ask him some questions about the war on the shore, and Junior was completely transparent about what the U.S. team was like, and especially how hard Kiowa was really playing. So, Dave, I really appreciate the time. Thank you so much for joining me here at the Back of the Range.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Well, as I said, we have just so many places we can go with you. You just got done. Let's start with this one of the most recent. You just turned 50. Tough break, but these things happen. And you just played your first Champions Tour event. How are you holding up? What'd you think of it?
Well, good. And I was laughing when you said that. I think it was harder on my parents knowing that they have a 50-year-old son than for me turning 50. And, but I had a great time. It had been 14 years since my last tour event. And I really only played a couple of mini tour events leading up to it. And I go back to Minnesota and play the 3M there. And I didn't know how my nerves would hold up, if I would be able to, take the club back and be able to make swings. And I was really happy that, when they announced my name on the first tee and I got up and I felt the same nerves I felt when I played on the PGA Tour, but nothing I couldn't handle. And I hit my first drive. I ripped it right down the left center of the fairway. And I was laughing. I handed the club to my buddy caddying for me, who's one of my best friends. And I said, you okay? And he takes the club and he looks at me, he goes, yeah, I just think I'm more nervous than you are.
Oh yeah, of course.
So Yeah, it was a blast to play with, my old constituents that I played with on tour. And it was kind of like a reunion of sorts. And of course, getting back into that grind mode, I knew it was going to be an interesting week playing. As a sponsor's pick, you got to play in whatever they ask you to play. And
Sure.
I played in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday Pro-Ams. And in the 4 Pro-Ams, I had 14 birdies and 2 eagles. And I think I was a total of 1 over on a golf course that the guys light up. And
Right.
so I wasn't smart enough to sit back and reflect, okay, what am I doing? What do I need to do? And I'm an aggressive player by nature. And when you haven't played in a long time, and especially competitively, taking the aggressive route really isn't the smartest, way to go. And,
Right.
and I learned that lesson. I started out par birdie the first round, and I threw in a triple and a double on the front to go with that. And, shot a smooth 78. And it was just frustrating that I did that. And then the 75, the second round, the same thing. I couldn't have shot any higher. I was just making silly mistakes. And but I kind of expected it a little bit. But the thing I was proud of is that I knew that if I work on my game and put the time in, that I can play still with these guys. And they have the advantage of they're playing week in and week out, and they're focusing on it. I'm doing 2 other jobs, and practicing when I can, playing when I can, but it's not a priority for me.
Well, and that's, you said it right there. You have so many other interests and so many other passion projects that you're working on. You have the Stockton Golf short game school with your father and with your brother. You're installing synthetic turf for entities all over the world and relating to golf. So there's so many other things that you're focused on. Do you see yourself as a touring Champions Tour player over the next several years, or do you think you'd like to just keep it the way it is, where it's kind of an occasional reunion of sorts with some of your guys from the regular tour?
I mean, realistically, I don't see myself playing out there every week, only because I can't devote the time to work on my game and get there. I got to take care of my family, and I love the teaching. I love designing these synthetic turf greens and putting them in for people. And I have a blast, but if I can get my game where I know it could be and put the time in and play some and have some success, then yeah, I'd have to reevaluate, what I have, what I do going forward, because, your window of opportunity on the Champions Tour is only so long. And unless you're Bernard Longer or Hale Irwin, who just keep doing what they're doing.
Of course. Who did you play with, or who did you see that you're most, who brought back some memories of maybe some stories from the regular tour that you saw during this tournament?
Oh my gosh. I mean, there's so many guys. Brant Jobe, I played a ton with him. We used to play practice rounds together every week. And, but I mean, everybody, from, Colin Montgomery to, I can't, it really was like a
high school reunion of sorts.
A reunion. Yeah. And, seeing the guys that, enjoy playing with. Blaine McAllister, I got to play with him one of the rounds, and he was one of my good friends and one of the nicest guys out there. Played Fran Quinn and Kent Jones, two guys like me that are more journeyman players out there that, just we're grinders on the regular tour, and they're having some success on the Champions Tour. And, I played with them the first day, and I saw how they just played their game, where I was all over the place. And, I learned a lot of stuff that week. It was just special. And, those guys out there, I've spent a lot of time over the last 10 years teaching guys on the regular tour as well. And, getting out there on the Champions Tour with those guys, it's a different vibe, still competitive as hell. It's much more of a family out there on the Champions Tour. Jesper Parnevik, who he and I got on tour the same year. at Q School in 93 when I was medalist. He was a shot behind me, and we got our cards for 94. And so we played a lot of golf together in the 90s. And, talking to him, he's like, it's so much more fun out here on the Champions Tour playing. And everybody says that.
Yeah.
Everybody says that. So, if you can get out there and stick out there for a few years, man, it's a heck of a way to make a living.
Sure. No, absolutely. Well, you talk about playing the Champions Tour. You definitely played your share of professional events on the PGA Tour and on, the Nike Tour nationwide, whatever they were calling it that week.
Right.
But I wanted to actually get into your first experience being on tour, which was actually a caddy for your father. So your father,
right.
Dave Stockton, 2-time major champion, Ryder Cup captain in 91. We were definitely going to get into Kiowa because I'm a licensed Ryder Cup dork. So anything Ryder Cup I got to talk about. But you're on tour caddying for your father. How old were you the first time you caddied in a PGA Tour event for your father?
I was 12.
That's just the most ridiculous. I mean, no offense, but that's just thing today. The way that is just the most ridiculous sounding thing I could ever think of. Like, I can't imagine a 12-year-old right now. I just can't fathom that. So you're 12 years old caddying for your dad in a tour event.
Yeah. As a kid growing up, I mean, I loved playing soccer and baseball, and I played golf, and I loved to hunt and fish. And, so if I wasn't doing the others, I was riding my bike to the golf course in Westlake Village and a little public course there and playing golf every day. And I just always, I definitely gravitated toward playing golf. And, when our summers were spent, Dad would play most of his tournaments in the summer because he liked warm weather with his, back issue from having broke his back when he was 16 in a surfing accident, which I still shake my head at because I can't see my dad surfing. But anyway,
I know about that accident. I was like, this can't be right. So
I know. So our summers were spent going out there and there was no daycare back then. Now the tour players have it pretty good, but they got daycare. Their kids and their wives come out and watch them play, but back then you were just walking. You're either caddying or you're hanging on to mom, and mom's got the brunt of it, and it's hot out there and 2 kids hanging all over her. And,
right.
Once I wasn't a big kid, but I started caddying, and I caddied for 3 months each summer, and that's how I learned the game. I didn't play a lot of junior golf. I played like 2 junior tournaments a year, and I'd get killed in both of them. I wasn't very competitive because I just hadn't played a lot of tournament golf, but I was learning the game. Even though I played all the time, I was learning the game, watching the best in the world do it. And each year I got better, and went through college, turned pro, and the rest is history. But I learned the game. I've seen over the years, I've seen far too many kids, even kids I played against, who could just blow me out of the water. And as we got older, they didn't improve. In fact, they regressed because they got burnt out. And there was no burnout in me because I didn't play a lot of tournament golf. And you look at it now with how it's set up, it's so different. I mean, I teach all these kids that are playing the HAGA and everything else. And, I played HAGA events right when they were first starting out. All you had to do is put your money into play. You didn't have to qualify or anything like that. And now there's a whole qualifying system and stars and points and whatever it is. And, it's highly competitive, which is, positive is when these kids turn pro, they're ready to play on tour.
Of course.
But the downside is for every kid that's ready to play on tour, there's 10 that are, fried and their parents have pushed them too hard or whatever it might be.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing wrong with a kid going through junior golf and getting a scholarship to an NCAA Division II team, getting an education and enjoying golf for the rest of his life, as opposed to at 17, they're like, the hell with this, and I don't like you, Dad, and all that crap.
Yeah.
And they look at golf as something that caused them pain in their childhood. So you basically were attending almost like a advanced seminar every summer on how to be a professional without getting the burnout of actually having to play.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it was, and watching my dad with the amateurs and how, he loved the corporate outings. They called him the king of the corporate outings.
I know that.
Yeah. and he knew how to handle himself with them, and it wasn't an act. It was genuine. And, you know,
Right.
you see people that are fake about it, and they just do it because they have to. And then you see people that are genuinely into it, like my dad is. And I learned from that. And, you know, I'm the same as he, and I are the same. Where it's not work for us to act like that and do that with people.
Right.
So, you know, and I laughed. I was kind of laughing when I was medalist in '93 at Q School. That right after Q School, they send all of us that qualified for the PGA Tour to Ponte Vedra to do like a couple days of how to prepare for playing on the tour and how to act around with media. And I'm like, yeah, I already know this.
Yeah, I could teach this class. I've been around the tour longer than yeah. So this is like a rookie symposium that you're like, can I just?
It was.
Can I like test out of this? I got it. I'm good.
I felt like I was already qualified, but I'm like, okay, I'll go. I don't want to. Yeah. I'm supposed to go. I'm going to go. So I did.
Nice. So, you know, you obviously have this really tight, great relationship with your father. You know, I'm sure that when you're out there and you're on his bag, you know, you look up to him. He's won 2 majors. He's a very successful, you know, professional. But you're also 12 and 13, and you're hanging out with all these tour stars, and you're seeing them week in, week out. Let's just pretend hypothetically that your dad is not going to hear this answer. Who were you looking at when you're out there as a kid and looking up to and saying, man, that guy, wow, he's really impressive?
The 2 guys, the one early on for me was Bill Rogers.
Okay.
I really liked Bill Rogers, and we're still very good friends. I see him once or twice a year still, and I just thought he was the coolest guy, and I just loved how he hit the ball. And he was just a genuinely nice guy, typical Texan, super nice. And just a fiery competitor, you know, just, you know, was a grinder and played hard. And that was the guy early on, the early 80s for me. And then mid 80s on, it was Payne Stewart. And and then Zinger. And I played a lot of golf with both of them. And in fact, I was with Payne at the old Disney tournament we used to play in Orlando. The week before Payne passed away was the Disney event. And the next tournament was for the journeyman guys like myself, Jackson, Mississippi. And then the other one was the Tour Championship, wherever they were going to play. And I was on the putting green after the round Saturday. And he and I were the only ones on the putting green. And we were just talking, and he was so at peace and just, you know, just had a great conversation. And 2 days later, he's gone. It was just very, very surreal and sad. And he was a great friend and huge loss to the tour.
Losing Payne was just terrible for golf, for the tour, for everyone. And I want to talk about him and Zinger in the 91 Ryder Cup at Kiowa. But before we get to that, I just want to ask at a question. You know, you played golf at USC. Your dad played golf at USC. You and your father and your grandfather are actually the first family for 3 generational single sport All-Americans. I'm not sure that you're aware of that. It sounds like you are. But, you know, you followed in your father's footsteps, whether it's playing the tour, whether it's being instructor. Did that ever feel unnatural? Did you ever have any point in your life where you're like, I need to kind of get some distance or make my own path? Did that ever cross your mind, or has it just, this is your normal?
No, this is my normal. My dad likes to say, you know, that if he hadn't been in the golf business, I would have been.
Okay.
You know, I mean, I did the commentating thing, which is something he didn't do.
Okay.
And I did real estate. I did real estate for a few years, which he definitely didn't do. And, but you know, the teaching thing kind of, after the real estate crash in 2008, I didn't really enjoy doing the real estate thing. And I started helping people with their games, and I really found that I loved helping people. And my dad had rotator cuff surgery and in 2009, and that was when Phil called and wanted to get some help, asked my dad for some help with putting. And he and I, you know, I grew up playing against Phil, and you know, finished second to him in the NCAAs at Oak Tree in '89, and played on tour against him, and he always beat me like he beat everybody else.
Yeah.
But I went with him down there to the Bridges to work with Phil as well, and the next week we worked with him 2 days, and the next week he won the tour championship by 3 shots, and that's when my dad and I kind of looked at. My dad knew his career was done playing on the tour after his rotator cuff surgery. And, I was done with real estate looking for something new. I knew I liked helping people. So that's how we kind of fell into the teaching thing. At the same time, where Ronnie's been teaching for a long time.
Right.
We transitioned into it, and that's when, we formed Stockton Golf, and, we did that for a number of years, all 3 of us together. And it's been, we're doing less of that now. And we were working with, considering we've had, with guys we've helped, we've got over on the regular tour, over 80 wins with the people we've helped over the years. And we're not working with anybody on the tour right now.
Okay.
And it's actually fine with my dad and I. We don't mind at all.
Well, and with all the things you're doing, it sounds like you just don't have the time to just be hanging around a range at a PGA Tour event. But you mentioned this thing with Phil Mickelson in '09, and I wanted to ask you about that. So he comes to you. I know a little bit of the backstory. He still has Bones on the bag, and Bones is like, "What do you think about going over and working with Stockton?" Were you guys even thinking about what the aftermath would be if that lesson worked as well as it did? Like, what was that like after Phil just goes off, his putting's great, and mentions that, I'm working with Dave Stockton? What was that like after that?
Well, it was nice that he mentioned that, that he owed a lot of that, his great play that week to the help that we gave him with the putting. And, he didn't have to do that.
Right.
And, but he did. And, we expected him to go out and play well. I can't tell you how many guys that we work with, and then the next week they go out and light it up. The number of guys that won the next week, I had it in 2010 with Adam Scott. I worked with him at the Players Championship. The next week he won the Texas Open after the first time working with him. And that was with the short putter. 2010 as well, Colonial. I worked with Justin Rose, and the next week he won Memorial for his first win on the PGA Tour. So we see guys have success right away after we work with them, and I think the thing that perplexes both my dad and I, and my brother, is that, we work with someone and they go out and they play great, or they're playing well, and then they just decide to switch and not stay with it. Rory's probably the biggest one, where, he won 4 majors working with us and got to number 1 in the world, and then we're no longer working with him. Hasn't won a major since. And, it's funny. They say, his putting's, has been his big problem. He won 2 majors by 8 shots when he was working with us. But no. And a lot of the work that was done with him in the very beginning was on the mental side, because we worked so much, because putting, especially putting,
right.
We specialize in the short game and putting, but we work on the mental side as well, because putting is 90% mental. You can have the world's most beautiful stroke, but if you're thinking the wrong way, or if you're thinking about a lot of things, or a mental midget, whatever you want to call yourself, it doesn't matter what your stroke looks like, because your head controls that.
Of course.
And so what we work on with people is getting them thinking the right way on the greens, because putting to me has always been easy. I just learned from my dad. He expects every putt to go in. I expect every putt to go in. And we were shocked to find, how many people don't expect putts to go in. Well, don't be shocked when they don't go in. It's,
of course. Do you
it's
think
it's pretty wild.
Do you think that, and this is just a theory or a thought, but do you think the fact that they don't come back to you is because that means they're kind of admitting that mentally they're not strong enough, and that they need someone else's help?
I don't know. You could call it an ego thing, whatever you want to call it. I know for me, if I've got someone that I'm having success with, I'm not changing my team.
Yeah.
I'm not changing things up. If I've got a formula that works, I'm not changing anything. I mean, the one guy that we've worked with over the years that we were like, yeah, we don't need to work with him anymore. He's got it because he had it mentally to begin with.
Yeah.
Was Matt Kuchar.
Really?
And Kuchar I use him a lot. Where 2010, he was number 1 on the money list and 5th in putting. And the beginning of 2011, we're doing a clinic at the Vintage Club in Indian Wells in the desert, and he practices there getting ready for the West Coast swing, and he wants to pick our brain on the greens. And, we're laughing. We go, he said, what are you laughing at? So, well, usually we get the guy that's ranked 150th in putting.
Exactly. Yeah.
And he laughed, and we asked him a couple questions, and you could see the light bulb turn on in his head. And, he had this cross-handed flip putting stroke. And, as a right-handed player, we believe your left hand is your direction hand. The back of that left hand should finish low and going down your target line.
Right.
Back of your left hand down your line, that's where the ball's going to go. And he was flipping it up where the left hand's pointing up and the left, but he was a good putter. And the reason why he was a good putter is because he's walking and smiling. He's walking and expecting it to go in.
Yeah.
But he had a stroke that he knew that was faulty. And so next week, 2 weeks later, it was Riviera. He's got the putter going up his arm. He goes, hey, Junior, what do you think? And we had never seen anybody do that. He was the first guy, but that was his way of, locking in that left wrist and keeping it solid right through. And he's stuck with it ever since. We worked with him for a couple months, and that we didn't need to work with him anymore because he's one of the best mentally on the tour that there's been. Wasn't gifted physically, with great golf swing, great mechanics, everything. But his mind, the way he thinks on the golf course, and his demeanor is what's made him a champion.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, and that you could say the same thing for a Jim Furyk.
Sure.
There's a golf swing that people have wanted to change that swing for 30 years. He's only got to break 60 twice. He only got to shoot 58.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's incredible. No, it makes a lot of sense. You're basically looking at two guys that are incredibly strong mentally, that have squeezed have squeezed the pulp out of their talent and gotten everything they can get. And So the instruction thing, we're all big dumb animals at these driving ranges, and I know you've been to over 1,000 driving ranges probably in your lifetime, even away from the PGA Tour. We all like these, 500cc turbo booster drivers, and the chipping and putting green looks like the dance floor to junior prom. Nobody wants to get near it.
Right.
Why is it so hard to get amateurs to fall in love with the short game? That's what you guys specialize in. Why is it so hard to get them to fall in love with that?
Because it's usually the hardest thing for people, and they like hitting the ball a long way, so they go out there and do that. But they don't. Where people lose their shots most is around the greens, and typically people will work on the things they're good at. They won't work on the things they're bad at because it's no fun. So you have that disconnect where, well, I'm going to go do what I'm good at. Like I was out at I was doing some work for PNC Bank at the father-son this couple weeks back, and I see on the driving range hitting ball. I'm on the putting green. I'd helped Jerry Pate a little bit with his putting. I was just out there putting myself, and Jerry turns around and he goes, "Yeah, look at that. There's Tom Kite hitting balls in the range. That's the last thing he needs to do. He needs to be out here on the putting green." and I just laughed, and I went over and hit balls after I was finished putting next to Tom, and I was talking to him, and he hits balls. He doesn't putt near as long as he hits balls. What's he good at? He's good at ball striking.
Right. There you go.
So it doesn't matter if you're a 15 handicap or a major winner on tour. A lot of times you'll see them working on the things they're good at and spend less time on what they're not good at, ironically.
Yeah. Okay. Cause that's always something that's been very fascinating to me about, everyone says you got to work on your short game and it's 100 yards and in, that's where you lower your scores. Is it also the fact that maybe they don't know how to work on their short games? Like they give up too soon because, well, I didn't chip that close or I didn't chip that in. Is it that they don't understand the concepts of the short game?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a part of that to it for sure. Techniques are they make it harder than it is, and they don't understand that there's both hands. The low shot is, if you're a right-handed player, the low chip is done. The left hand's the dominant hand, and the high shot is the right hand,
Right.
finishing high. So you don't have both hands fighting each other, and people don't understand that. And, it's funny when I give lessons to people for the first time and we go to the short game thing, and their techniques are usually, they're hanging back and they're flipping their hands, and, it's inconsistent and they're not stable. And it doesn't take long to get them where they need to be. And then they're like, well, this is a lot easier.
Yeah.
But it's, everybody's different. I think the mechanical players are tougher, struggle more on the greens because putting's an art. And it's more of being an artist in a visualize, trust, let it go type thing. And a mechanical player like a Justin Rose tries to be perfect, tries to get it just so. And gosh, I can remember, I don't know how many times watching my dad in a tour event as a kid growing up caddying, and he'd take the putter back and he'd get it stuck going back, but he'd keep going and he putted anyway, and he'd make it 9 times out of 10. And I'd say, hey Dad, you got the putter stuck going back. He goes, yeah, that just means I'm keeping it low.
Because mentally because he's just so confident mentally. He's like, yeah, I don't care about that. Yeah.
And you see a guy at Kapalua this week, stub it going back. He's not continuing the stroke. He's stopping, backing off, going through his routine again.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that. But I just laugh at, my dad's like, it's how it goes through. If I keep it low, it's all good,
That's awesome.
And it just, because it is a mindset thing for sure.
Sure. Well, I don't want to gloss over and not get to your professional career. You did win twice on the Nike Tour and was extremely successful in Q School, getting through 3 times and
four times.
I'm sorry, getting through 4 times. And
that's not a great thing though. That's not that just means I struggled on tour. I had to keep going back.
Well, yeah, okay. Well, let's not confuse people with the facts, Dave. Okay, let's just but what I'm getting at is you got through it. I want to know how you mentally were able to do something like that to keep your career. I mean, we're looking at basically, 15, 20-year career between the PGA Tour and the Nationwide or Nike. But so I want to ask you briefly about that. But before you do, I can't control myself any longer. I need to talk about the 91 Ryder Cup at Kiowa, the War by the Shore.
Mm-hmm.
This is the reason I'm really not going to ask about too much. I mean, we all know who won. We know Longer missed the last putt. Right. I know it was contentious due to the war at the time. There's all that stuff that's very, very well documented. But the thing I want to ask about is your dad's the captain, and now we have, the pods, and we have the 5 vice captains, and they're all going to be groomed to be a future captain. And in 91, the U.S. team selects your dad, Dave Stockton, to be the captain, and his vice captains are you and your brother. So it's like the Stockton family that is running it. When did your dad come to you and your brother Ron and say, so you guys are going to be the assistants? Like, how did this all happen? How did the PGA sign off on that?
Well, they didn't have a say. It was my dad's call. And
that's awesome.
And, it was a family deal, from my mom picking out the outfits for the wives to, my dad, and how my dad he had 2 captain's picks, and that was the hardest thing he had to do.
Okay.
In fact, he had said to Tom, Curtis Strange that Curtis won the U.S. Open 89 and 90. Right.
Yeah.
And in 1990, my dad, after he wins the second U.S. Open, my dad says, "You're on the team."
Yeah, of course.
And of course, 91. Tom's not playing, or Curtis isn't playing good, and he's struggling. And he actually came to my dad and said, "Don't pick me. My game is not where it needs to be."
Wow.
And what my dad did was he let the 10 guys on the team pick from 1 to 4 between it was Tom Watson, Tom Kite, Raymond Floyd, and Chip Beck. And he gave the 10 guys on the team, he said, I want you to pick 1 to 4, 1 and 2 being your top 2 guys, who you want on the team. So he had the guys on the team's input of the next 2 players that were picked, the last 2. And of course, Raymond Floyd was a pick because, and the reason he was picked was at the time, Fred Couples, who won the Masters in April, he still didn't know how good he was yet.
Right.
And he was very young. And Raymond was going to partner with him, and they'd be a great pairing. And then Chip Beck was picked because, well, Chip Beck shot 59, I think, in 91.
Yeah.
At Vegas. And, Chip is the most confident, positive guy. You'll never find someone more positive than that guy. I mean, he could have the worst possible thing happen to you and he'd find a silver lining in it. And I think about, those are the two picks, and the guys wanted him both on the team. And we're playing practice rounds the week before the Ryder. My dad had the guys fly in to get familiar with Kiowa because
right.
You can't play that course 2 or 3 times and expect, okay, I got it, because the wind comes from different directions all the time. So my dad had him come in the week prior and then let him go home on the weekend before coming back on Monday. And I went out. He said, go out and play with them. So I went out and played with him. Zinger was my partner, and we're playing. And, we've got 8 guys playing in this big group going out. And Chip Beck's out there. And what's that?
No, I was just going to say, you had to have just been like, how the hell am I here? You're like,
what, it was pretty.
You're like 22 or 23.
22, just turned pro. Yeah.
And you're just and you're hanging out with Ray Floyd and Lanny Watkins, and this is the pressure cooker. This is the biggest thing. And you're just, Did you feel like, and I'm going to get back to that practice round, but what was your kind of involvement as the assistant captain? Did you have the confidence to kind of talk to these guys as a captain, or was it? How did you feel going into that?
I was there. I was there if the guys needed anything or had any questions, or I would go out with a group where my dad wasn't able to see them, and I'd go out and I had input. My dad would ask me how so-and-so is playing. Should he play in the afternoon? And there was a couple times, and I can't think of the instances, but, I said, I think that so-and-so should play. I'm not sure about, I don't think you should send this guy out and blah, blah, blah. And what really got thrown, we would have, and my dad will say this too, we would have won by more than the point. It wouldn't have come down to that last putt.
Okay.
Had Steve Pate not gotten hurt in the limo accident.
That's right.
Going to one of the PGA of America functions, and he couldn't play, and the day he got hurt, he shot 66 on a golf course that nobody else broke 74 or 5. He was playing better than everybody on either side of on either team, and he was going to partner with Corey Pavin, who was his teammate at UCLA.
Yeah,
and they were going to play all 4 matches together. You weren't going to beat those 2 Bruins, and then as soon as he gets hurt, it's like we had to scramble. It's like, okay, who are we going to pair with Corey? Now we got to mix things up. And we had, Wayne Levy was having a rough year after being player of the year before. He couldn't break 80 on the golf course. I mean, it was a very difficult golf course. It was harder when it first opened than it was when Rory won the PGA a few years back. It was so much more raw in 91, and it was just brutal. But and both sides struggled. That golf course was that was a Pete Dye it's an amazing golf course. I mean, what he did out there is just unreal. And to have the pressure cooker of the Ryder Cup, the things got blown out of hand a little bit with they call it the war by the shore, and obviously with the Gulf War going on, and the camo hats. A lot of people made a big issue of the camo hats. The reason for the camo hats is we like to hunt, and we thought it'd be cool to have camo hats for hunting when we go home.
Yeah.
And the players liked them so much, like, hey, we're going to wear those camo hats. You can see my dad wore the straw hat one,
right?
But you saw players wearing the camo ones, and it wasn't anything about a war against Europe or anything like that. But it kind of got blown out of proportion in the press, and obviously there were some heated times between Seve, which always happens with guys, and Raymond and Zinger.
The ball compression, switching the balls.
Well, and Seve with his little coughing, and Raymond walked over. The beauty was, he was doing that when Chip Beck hit, and Raymond walked over to Seve and said, "You cough one more time, I'm going to give you a reason to cough." And you didn't hear him cough anymore after that. It was an amazing week. And back then there was no homes, there was no hotel at Kiowa. There was nothing there except for this one 6-story condominium building on the beach, and the European team had the first 3 floors, and the U.S. team had the next 3 floors, and we were all in the same building. We were all in the same. Both teams were in the same building. It was so surreal. I can think of Saturday night before singles, and we're in the team room, and we finished dinner, and Payne gets the boom box going, and he puts on Born in the USA, Bruce Springsteen,
Right,
and he's
right.
on top of the table with a bandana, USA, bandana on, and singing into the top of his lungs, and just pumping up the team, and it was a cool time.
Wow. That's 22 years old. You're just kind of hanging in the team room at a Ryder Cup. Oh God. I doing my Ryder Cup research, you could easily say that, well, probably 1979 is really when the Ryder Cup turned. That's when Europe got involved. And
Yep.
It wasn't just GB and I, but that 91 year, whether, correct or incorrect with the war on the shore and the camo hats, all that stuff. I mean, that's really kind of the year that really elevated things. And then, we go to 93 at Belfry, and then Valderrama, and then it really kind of elevates. What do you think now about the Ryder Cup? Has it gotten a little bit too blown out of proportion? Do we have too many cooks in the kitchen with 4 or 5 vice captains? What's your take on where the Ryder Cup is now as compared to your firsthand knowledge of it in 91?
No, I think that it's better now with what Zinger did. He took the pod system.
Right.
He took what my dad did in 91 and advanced it into, the pod system, like the Navy SEALs, and it worked to a T there at Valhalla. And you don't need to change that formula. The problem, anytime we lose, everybody's going to point fingers.
Sure,
okay, well,
sure.
Jim did this, he didn't do this, or whatever. It's always going to fall on the captain. But that's a golf. If you're going to go play in Europe, they're going to bring the fairways in. The rough's going to be super high.
Yep.
So it's going to take away the bombers that hit along. Because here in the U.S., you go, watch Kapalua this week. You can hit it 350. The fairways are 100 yards wide, and that the regular tour events, the rough is usually not that long, and it's just you go play over there for the Ryder Cup, and everything's magnified because now you're not playing for yourself, you're playing for a team in a country. And then you have a setup. Like, I think going over there, I would have had a Xander Schauffele or a Kevin Kisner picked on the team,
Right.
Because they drive it so straight.
Yep.
And that's what you needed there. You're hitting out of the rough, you're giving up a half a shot a hole. And Phil probably wasn't the best pick, but it was Jim and Phil have been friends a long time, and hindsight, you can always look back and go, yeah, he was a bad pick. He didn't play well.
Well,
what if he went out and lit it up? He might have gone out and played great, and everybody's like, oh, it was a brilliant pick, Jim.
Well, and then also Tiger. I mean, you got to pick Tiger after winning the Tour Championship, but Tiger, to me, just looked completely exhausted.
He was exhausted, and and rightly so. What he had just done,
yeah, of course.
All that. The only thing I would have done different with him, I would have played him 3 matches, not 4. I mean, he played too much. He played too much golf.
Yeah.
And he didn't need to play, that many matches. He could have, played 1 less, and it might have helped. But you could see he was gassed too. So,
yeah.
It's you learn from it. It's tough. It's going to continue to be really hard to win over there because they know, they're going to bring the rough in. They're going to have the crowds. Those European fans are amazing.
Yes,
and and it just that pressure of a Ryder Cup, it's not for everyone. And it's magnified even more now than, I was at the one at Valhalla when Zinger, my dad was his assistant to Zinger, and
sure.
I went to that one, and Zinger asked me if I would drive Raymond around. So I was Raymond's driver.
Oh, wow.
And he was one of the, and so I've won as an assistant and an assistant's assistant.
There you
so
go.
I feel like I'm 2-0, but
now, Junior, if you need, if you need an assistant, I'm putting my name out there first, so I can whatever you need. Need laundry done? You need me to drive you around? You just let me know. So I got a resume on hand. I'll shoot it over to you. That's really cool that you've been so involved with all of these Ryder Cups. You've been great with your time. We've talked a lot about golf, but I need to ask you about one of your passions, which is you're an outdoorsman. You like to hunt. You know, I think you know, whether it be hunting, fishing, camping, I have friends that are bow hunters, mainly deer. And like I said, I know you're an outdoorsman. Is there one particular hunting trip that you can tell me about that is just a prime example or just a good hunting story from the outdoors? You know, we had your good buddy Kevin Hammer on the podcast earlier in season 1. I'm easily setting you up for this because we both know the story, but tell me a good hunting story, and then if you can figure out some way to wedge Kevin Hammer into this story, that'd work out perfectly.
Well, yeah, Kevin, you know, unlike myself, Kevin did not grow up in a house where his dad was into hunting. And, you know, I had my grandfather who owned a sporting goods store and taught my dad the love of the outdoors, hunting and fishing. And my dad's weeks off from golf, we'd be hunting or fishing somewhere. And so I grew up with it. And Kevin always wanted that. Our summers growing up in Keystone, Colorado, where my dad was director of golf at Keystone Ranch, and Kevin's dad, Rory Hammer, was the head pro. You know, we'd spend our summers there, and, you know, we're out there shooting the prairie dogs, and, you know, because they're making a mess of the golf course with all the holes. And, you know, that was fun. But, you know, a few years ago, I went up, friends have a hunting area up in Manitoba for black bear, and they got zillions of these black bear up there. And I went up and I got my black bear, and I'm like, okay, I've been there, done that. Well, my dad loves doing it, and he went back a couple times, finally got his. And after he got his, every year he keeps going back, but he's taking people up there hunting.
Sure.
He's like, I'm bringing so-and-so this time. I'm like, okay. I mean, I thought it was okay. I got a staph infection on the trip. I could pass on going bear hunting again. I don't need to do that. And so Kevin's like, I don't know. My dad talked to Kevin. He's like, you got to come. You got to do this bear hunt. And he's like, oh yeah, that'd be great. And I can just picture his girls at home, his wife and 3 daughters, rolling their eyes, going, "You cannot shoot a bear." You know, they're not into hunting at all.
You can't shoot Yogi.
You can't shoot Yogi and Boo Boo. That's not allowed.
Yeah.
And so, you know, all he's ever shot in his life were some prairie dogs and a few quail, right? And so he goes up there with my dad, and my dad and I, our bears that we shot were both 400-pound black bears in the spring. So, you know, they'd be like 700 or 800-pound bears in the fall, and so they're nice bears in the spring. He goes up in the spring with my dad, and he shoots the biggest one ever shot up there at 780 pounds or something like that. This is in the spring. I mean, here's a guy that shot probably 20 animals in it, birds combined, birds and prairie dogs, maybe 20 animals in his life, and he shoots the biggest bear ever shot up there. And I'm laughing. I'm like, I know that bear rug's not in his house. I know it's somewhere far from the house where the kids don't see it. And, you know, but that's typical, right? The guy that's not a hunter or not, you know, you're not going to, you get the biggest one. It's like, okay, that makes sense.
Was he, and you don't have to answer this question because this is personal to him, and I don't want to completely throw him under the rug. You see what I did there? Bear rug, see that? Was he wearing, like, you know, leather penny loafers out there on the hunt, or did he at least look like a hunter when he was doing it?
I think he had Cole Haan hunting boots on. Is what he was wearing.
That's great. That's great. Well, Kevin, that's awesome. Oh, I know Kevin Hammer's listening to this right now, just saying, I never should have put these 2 idiots together and given them microphones. Oh, that's so good. Well, Dave, I feel we could probably go for a couple more hours, but we're going to cut the episode. I hope we can get together and do it again soon. These are great stories. I really do appreciate the time. And we'll have to catch up again soon. But thanks for joining me here at the Back of the Range.
Ben, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
And there you have it. That was episode 56. Thank you so much to Dave Stockton Jr. for joining us this week. Incredible stories. I will be at the PGA Merchandise Show next week in Orlando. But don't worry, we'll have another episode for you next week here at the Back of the Range.